Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Heidi Alexander.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is in Italy and I've been asked to reply. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under this government's leadership, the construction of social rented homes has fallen to a 20-year low. But since 2010, the amount of housing benefit paid to private landlords has risen by £1.5 billion. Does the Chancellor understand the connection, or would he like to come to my next advice surgery so my constituents can explain it to him?
Well, first of all, of course we're aware there is an acute housing shortage in London, which is why we need to build more homes. But I can tell the Honourable Lady this. We built more council housing in the last 5 years than in the entire 13 years of the last Labour government. And I'm very happy to come to Lewisham, where we will talk about the fact that today the claimant count is down by 25% over the year, and long-term youth unemployment is down 45% in the last year. The economic plan in Lewisham is working.
Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pensions are a really important issue to my constituents. The government has delivered on its side of the bargain by giving savers the freedom to access their pensions. Will the Chancellor do all he can do to make sure that the industry lives up to its side of the bargain and delivers on those freedoms?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right that the pension freedoms we introduced in April deliver a fundamental Conservative principle that people who have worked hard and saved hard all their lives should be trusted with their own money. 60,000 people have accessed their pension savings, but there are clearly concerns that some companies are not doing their part to make those freedoms available. We are investigating how to remove barriers, and we are considering now a cap on charges, and I'm asking the Financial Conduct Authority to investigate. People who have worked hard and saved hard deserve a better deal.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I begin by congratulating the Right Honourable Gentleman on his appointment as First Secretary of State. It was reported this week that Talha Asmal, a 17-year-old from Dewsbury, blew himself up in an ISIL attack that killed 11 people. I'm sure the Right Honourable Gentleman will agree that we need to do everything that we can to prevent our young people from travelling to Iraq and Syria. So can he confirm whether the government now has an agreement in place with all of the airlines to raise alerts when unaccompanied minors travel to known Syrian routes, and that our police are being notified by the Turkish authorities when British citizens arrive at transit points to Syria?
Well, first of all, can I thank him for his welcome, and can I welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman to his place? I think his father would be extremely proud to see him leading for the Labour Party today. And can I say, speaking for this side of the House, we're extremely relieved to see that there's no Ben in the leadership contest opposite, but plenty of Benites. Now, when it comes to the very serious situation around ISIL, when he raises the very serious situation around ISIL, I think everyone in this House is shocked that a 17-year-old citizen of our country can become radicalised and become apparently a suicide bomber on the other side of the world. And of course, we've also got those distressing reports of the families from Bradford. So we are taking a number of steps. First of all, we want to work with schools and mosques and other community institutions to help prevent the radicalisation. There's a new statutory duty to do that. Second, we're working with the airlines, including getting in place those agreements that he talks about and providing the training at the borders to stop people travelling to countries like Syria and indeed removing their passports if they attempt to do so. But third, and this will be an issue in this Parliament, we also need to make sure our security and intelligence services have the powers they need to track people who are trying to get back into this country, and I look forward to cross-party support on that issue.
Hilary Benn.
I'm grateful for that reply. I think the House would appreciate an update on the progress of those discussions with the airlines, and I noted that he wasn't able to respond to the question I asked about the Turkish authorities, because it's a very serious matter and we need to know where things have got to. Now, we know that for some time there has been a growing number of young people being groomed to travel to Syria and Iraq. Last November, the Intelligence and Security Committee criticised the government for not giving the PREVENT programme sufficient priority and concluded, and I quote, that counter-radicalization programmes are not working. Why does he think this is?
Well, frankly, I don't accept all of those conclusions, and there's been a disagreement about the PREVENT programme. But frankly, I think in the past, there was a confusion between the programmes that supported integration and the programmes that tried to prevent radical extremism. And as a result, certain organisations got money that should never have got public money under the last government. So the PREVENT programme is doing its work. But we have passed a very important law in this Parliament that now ensures there is a statutory duty on these public authorities, like schools, like universities, like the police, to develop the PREVENT strategy and the counter-radicalisation strategy, because where I think we agree, and let's, after all, on an issue like this, try and find areas where we agree. Where we agree is we need to do more in these communities to prevent this radicalisation taking place in the first place.
Hilary Benn.
Can I assure the Right Honourable Gentleman that he will, of course, have the full support of this side of the House in measures that are taken to try and deal with this problem. But can he assure us that community-led PREVENT programmes are now actually being implemented in places like Dewsbury and elsewhere, including providing appropriate training to teachers and other workers in the public sector as the new public sector duty that he's just referred to comes into force in 2 weeks' time?
Well, I can confirm that that training is taking place, and indeed we've provided additional resources. But in the spirit of this constructive conversation, we have an extremism bill, which was in the Queen's speech, which goes further in seeking to disrupt groups that are plotting to either commit offences here in this country or indeed to travel abroad and become further radicalised. I hope the Labour Party looks seriously at that extremism bill and offers its support to this side of the House.
Hilary Benn.
It's now clear that right across the Middle East and North Africa, the common enemy is ISIL. Does the Right Honourable Gentleman agree that our strategic objective must be to continue to bring together all of the countries affected in the region and internationally to put aside other differences and cooperate to confront ISIL?
Well, I, of course, completely agree with the Right Honourable Gentleman, and Britain plays a leading role in bringing together the various allies that are delivering the impact against ISIL, and indeed we have had some welcome news of prominent terrorist leaders, not necessarily in the ISIL organisation, but in other organisations, who have been killed in the last couple of days. And if those reports are correct, it's a very, very welcome step forward in the global fight against terrorism. But he's absolutely right. Ultimately, the Iraqi government and the Syrian people are going to have to find a way to take greater control of their own security. In Iraq, of course, we work with the legitimate government there. In Syria, we support the moderate opposition, and we continue to support and train them in the tasks that they undertake.
Hilary Benn.
On that subject, turning now to how we resolve the crisis, which has seen, as the Right Honourable Gentleman will know, the largest movement of refugees since the end of the Second World War, can he tell the House what expectations he has for the new round of talks that UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura is holding in Geneva?
Well, first of all, of course, he's right to talk about the displaced persons, particularly in countries like Jordan and in Turkey, who are bearing an enormous burden. That is why Britain has such a massive aid contribution. And I think, again, across this House, we can be incredibly proud that the parties in the recent general election stood on a commitment to deliver 0.7% of our national income in development aid. And it is in not just a humanitarian effort, but also to make sure that we're able to help in situations like this. When it comes to burden sharing across the region, of course we want to help, but I think we have to be realistic. We cannot take large numbers of Syrian refugees into our country.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, as more and more people gather in Libya to try and cross the Mediterranean, HMS Bulwark is doing an extraordinary job in rescuing frightened people. But we learned yesterday that its deployment is under active review. Having made a grave error last October in withdrawing support from the Mare Nostrum search and rescue operations, can the Right Honourable Gentleman assure the House that the Government will continue to save the lives of those in peril on that sea?
Well, of course, I can give him the assurance that we will continue to play our full part in the search and rescue operation in the Mediterranean. As I understand, there is essential maintenance that needs to be carried out on HMS Bulwark, which is clearly an operational issue. But no one should in any way doubt Britain's determination to play its role in helping with this situation. But can I end on this point, which in the end is this? Taking people out of the water and rescuing them and their lives, of course, is absolutely essential. And we're a humanitarian nation and we need to deal with that. But in the end, you have to break the link which enables someone to get on a boat and then claim asylum in Europe and spend the rest of their lives on the European continent. And that is the draw that draws these people who are aiming for a better life but circumventing proper immigration controls to the European continent. And I think we should work across Europe to break that link. And I look forward to his role in helping us do that.
Ellen Whately!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Businesses in Kent need capable school leavers and graduates to employ. Could my right honourable friend explain what the government is doing to ensure that pupils study the most important academic subjects like maths that employers value?
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend, and of course, my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, set out, I think, really important education reforms yesterday, and the introduction of the e-bag, which will increase rigour in our schools, make sure that children in our schools are learning the essential subjects they need to get great jobs. And of course, today, not much talked about yet, but perhaps later in this session, we should reflect on the fact that unemployment is down again in our country. Employment is up, long-term unemployment is down as well, and for the first time, wages are growing faster than since the Great Recession, and that shows that our economic plan is working.
Angus Robertson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Iraq War a decade ago and its aftermath has been an unmitigated disaster. The Chilcot inquiry into the causes of that war has now been running for 6 years at a cost of £10 million. Is it true that the Chilcot report has been delayed until next year?
Yes, tell us.
Well, the Chilcot inquiry is, of course, completely independent of government, and we do not determine when it publishes its conclusions. But where I agree with the honourable gentleman is this: it has been a long time coming, and people, I think, are running out of patience. They want to see that report. I'd make a broader observation, but of course there was a cross-party alliance between the Scottish Nationalists and the Conservative Party when we called for that inquiry to be set up earlier than it actually was. And if it had been, we'd had the conclusions now.
Angus Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's worth remembering that the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister both voted for the war that we were led into by the then Labour government. Does he feel that he has no moral or political responsibility to get to the bottom of the reasons why we went into this catastrophic war in the first place? And what is he going to do about it?
That responsibility is fulfilled when we voted to create that independent inquiry. We want to see the results of that independent inquiry. I think those involved in Chilcot would have heard the view of the House of Commons today, and indeed public concern about how long this inquiry is taking. But ultimately, it is an independent inquiry. If it wasn't an independent inquiry, people would question its motives and the basis upon which it had been set up. It is independent, but I think it should get on with it.
Dame Angela Watkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The tunnel boring part of the Crossrail project is now completed. The route will run through my constituency at Harold Wood. Would the Chancellor join me in congratulating everybody who's been involved in this most amazing feat of engineering, of which this country must be truly proud?
Well, I think my honourable friend rightly draws attention to one of the great engineering marvels of the world, which is this fantastic Crossrail tunnel that has been built up under one of the oldest capital cities on the planet. The honourable gentleman there says, how much does it cost? It did cost money, but I tell you what, this government is investing in the infrastructure to provide the jobs in the future. And if we weren't making the savings in the government budget elsewhere, we wouldn't be able to provide for our children.
Mr. David Lammy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's both...
It's all that hot curry, it's getting to you. Calm yourself, man. Calm down. Bit of yoga would help. Right, Mr. Lammy.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. It is both sad and disturbing that the number of reported rapes in Greater London has risen by 68% in the last 10 years. Sexual crime is up by 35% in the last year. Will the Chancellor commit the extra resources to the police to ensure that they catch and jail the perpetrators, but also that they continue to support organisations working with women in the most sensitive manner?
Of course we continue to provide that support, and indeed we have, through the operational independence of the Metropolitan Police, seen the police focusing more on these heinous crimes. And of course one of the better pieces of news is there's been increased reporting as well, and women coming forward who have been victims of this horrific crime. But I'm always prepared to look at extra requests for resources if there's more we can do to help.
Richard Harrington.
In my constituency of Watford, Mr. Speaker, in 1 year alone in the last Parliament, the number of apprenticeships doubled, which was part of more than 2 million apprenticeship starts in the country as a whole. Clearly very beneficial to businesses and to the young people alike. Would my right honourable friend confirm that a further growth in apprenticeships is an important priority for this government?
Well, I can confirm that 3 million apprenticeships is the objective of this government in this Parliament, building on our success of providing 2 million apprenticeships in the last Parliament. And I think the whole House will want to congratulate my honourable friend on becoming the apprenticeships advisor to the Prime Minister. And he has a very important role to play, because there are many companies, great companies, who run great apprenticeship programmes, but not enough companies do have those apprenticeship programmes, and I hope they're going to receive a knock on the door from my honourable friend.
Right, Davis.
Will he confirm that the wastewater from fracking will be properly treated so it's safe to drink again?
Well, we will have the proper environmental standards around the exploration of shale gas. But I think for this country to turn its back on one of these great natural resources which other countries are using would be to basically condemn our country to higher energy bills and not as many jobs. And frankly, I don't want to be part of a generation that says all the economic activity was happening somewhere else in the world and wasn't happening in our country and wasn't happening on our continent. So we should get off with the safe, environmentally protected exploration of our shale gas resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent months, Jodrell Bank successfully secured the future of the globally significant Square Kilometre Array telescope project at its site, and over £12 million in heritage lottery funding to highlight its unique science heritage. Does my right honourable friend agree this is further evidence of the importance of science in his compelling vision of a northern powerhouse?
Well, my honourable friend is quite right to draw attention to the success that Manchester University and Jodrell Bank have had in securing the international headquarters of the Square Kilometre Array experiment. I visited Jodrell Bank in the middle of the election campaign to drop in to congratulate them on their achievement, which was achieved during the Purdah period, but under instructions issued by the previous government. It is the world's largest science experiment. It's an incredible collaboration across nations, and I'm extremely proud that its headquarters are in the Northern Powerhouse.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today sees a mass lobby here in Westminster of people who are demanding urgent action on climate change. Since coal is the most damaging of the fossil fuels, does he agree that, as well as phasing out coal, we in this House have a responsibility to divest our parliamentary pension fund from fossil fuels, as they've done in Norway very recently?
Well, it's way above my pay grade to interfere with the parliamentary trustees of the pension fund here, and I leave the decisions on investments to them. But I would agree with the honourable lady that the lobby of Parliament is important today, and those Paris talks at the end of the year are a real opportunity to get a global commitment to binding standards and carbon targets. Britain's going to play its full part. What we want to achieve is the dealing with those greenhouse gas emissions, meeting our international obligations on climate change, but doing it in the cheapest way possible for the consumers of electricity here in Britain.
Johnny Mercer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After years of undeserved neglect, my city of Plymouth is beginning to enjoy some infrastructure investment and realise it's quite brilliant potential. And you can see that in today's jobs figures that have shown an unemployment fall of almost half since this Chancellor came in. Would the Chancellor confirm to me a most important step on this is our Hitachi train deal? Will he confirm to me where we are with that today, please?
Well, my honourable friend is already doing a great job in speaking up for the city of Plymouth alongside my honourable friend for Plymouth Sutton. And as a result, we've got major investments into transport in the southwest, like the upgrade of the A303, and of course the new trains on the Great Western Line down to the southwest. I can confirm we're in active discussions to provide those new trains, and we hope to have further good news later this summer.
Jess Phillips.
I'll stop. According to the Women's Aid annual survey last year, on one single day, there were 132 women aged 18 to 20 living in refuge after being attacked, assaulted, and in some cases raped. Will the Chancellor today guarantee for me and those women that those living in supported accommodation, like refuge, will not be included in his government plans to remove housing benefit from those aged 18 to 21, or will he see 132 women abused return to their violent partners every day?
Well, we made it very clear when we set out our proposals on housing benefit that we would protect particularly vulnerable people, such as the people that the honourable lady refers to, and I welcome her to the House. But I would make a broader argument about welfare reform. This country faces a very simple choice. We've got 1% of the world's population, 4% of its GDP, but we undertake 7% of the world's welfare spending. Now, we can either carry on a completely unsustainable path, or we can continue to reform welfare so that work pays and we give a fair deal to those on welfare, and indeed a fair deal to the people, the taxpayers of this country who pay for it.
Order. Order. Mr. Andrew Tyree.
Chancellor, thank you. Does the Chancellor agree that today's elections to chairmanships of select committees are a great success story for Parliament as a whole? And it, in which I'm very grateful for that further gesture of support from the whole House of Commons. In which case, since they are a success, and particularly if the Prime Minister is going to miss a few Wednesdays, would he suggest to the Prime Minister that he now appear before the Liaison Committee more than 3 times a year?
Well, I'll certainly pass on the request, but my honourable friend is right to draw attention to the success of these elections, which didn't, of course, exist before the Conservatives came into office. I'm not sure that his own election is the best possible example of this, since I think he's unelected and unopposed in his own election.
Well, elected unopposed, anyway. Yes. I think that's what the right honourable gentleman meant. Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to add my tribute to CAFOG, Christian Aid and thousands of others outside today making the case for a tough deal on climate change. And can the Chancellor explain what the government is doing diplomatically to support a tough global deal, but also to ensure a level field for carbon-efficient companies in the UK, like Celsa Steel in my own constituency, to ensure that we don't see global emissions simply increase by offshoring them to places like China?
Well, that of course is why a global deal is so important, and we are actively engaged in these negotiations. Indeed, the Prime Minister was speaking to the French President about it only last week. So we're absolutely determined that Britain plays a leading role, along with our colleagues in Europe, in delivering that binding global targets so that individual parts of the world can't opt out.
Henry Smith.
Mr. Speaker, employment in Crawley is at record high levels, with companies like Creative Pod having created extra jobs. Can my right honourable friend say what additional policies can be introduced by the government to ensure that small and medium-sized companies can flourish further still?
Well, of course, the small and medium-sized businesses, of which we've seen, I think, around 750,000 created in the last 5 years, are the engine of growth in our economy. And they're one of the reasons why, as he says, the claimant count in his own constituency is down by almost 2/3. And I think even more encouragingly, the long-term youth claimant count is today down by 75%. So we'll go on doing things like providing that employment allowance, which helps those small businesses employ more people. Of course, what would be disastrous would be to abandon the economic plan, borrow and spend more, because the worst thing for a small business is economic instability that puts them out of business.
Judith Cummins.
The Chancellor will be aware of the appalling incident this Thursday at Dixon's King's Academy in my constituency, where a pupil is accused of stabbing his teacher, Mr Vincent Azuma. I'm sure that the whole House would wish to join me in expressing its shock at this horrifying incident, and also to wish Mr Azuma a swift and full recovery. Can the Chancellor tell the House what steps he's taking to tackle knife crime in our schools?
Well, first of all, can I say to the Honourable Lady, I think she speaks for the whole House in sending the sympathies to Mr Zuma and, of course, to the pupils and staff of that school. I think our hearts go out to them. I think the leadership in that school dealt with the situation incredibly well, and I know my honourable friend, the Education Secretary, spoke to the head. Of course, what we've done is given teachers now powers to search bags of pupils and the like, but if there are more things we can do as we learn the lessons of this incident, of course we will.
Mr Richard Drax.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Figures released today show that the number of Job Seekers Alliance claimants in my constituency South Dorset have dropped over the last 5 years by nearly 60%. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his recent letter, and can I ask him to agree with me that further rail investment down to Weymouth and Portland will increase jobs and prosperity in my constituency?
Well, my honourable friend has raised with me the case of his particularly slow rail service to Weymouth and Portland, and we will look into it. We are making a massive commitment to the South West, the biggest ever commitment of infrastructure to the South West, the £7 billion programme, and I will look to see what we can do to improve the rail service for his constituents so that we properly connect up the South West.
Tom Brake.
Chancellor will be aware that under the coalition £219 million was allocated to rebuilding St Helier Hospital. Would he like to restate the commitment to that funding so that we can save St Helier?
Well, we did commit to that hospital project, and provided it continues to provide value for money, which I'm pretty clear it does, we will go on providing that support. Of course, what we've done is commit to the Simon Stevens plan for the National Health Service, an additional £8 billion of NHS spending, something you can only do if you've got your public finances in better order and you're growing your economy, and that's precisely what we're doing.
Amanda Soloway.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Since my right honourable friend became Chancellor, unemployment has fallen in Derby by 64%. Our city recently topped a list of 138 cities, towns and counties as the fastest growing economy in the UK. This will come as no surprise to the Chancellor, who recently visited my constituency and spoke about the Midlands being Britain's engine for growth. Does he agree with me that we should do even more to support small business across the Midlands to create more jobs, better skills and boost our economy even further?
Well, I very much enjoyed visiting the engineering firm Garendale in her constituency a couple of weeks ago, and it's an outstanding example of a successful medium-sized business growing in the East Midlands, exporting around the world, and it's what we want to see more of in our country. That's why we've got a policy that delivers economic security for our nation in uncertain times, delivers more jobs, more infrastructure, more support for small businesses, all so we can back the working people of this country.
Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman referred to Tala Aslam from my constituency, who's alleged to have become the UK's youngest ever suicide bomber. Will the Chancellor agree to convene a meeting between myself and Home Office ministers to discuss a revisit and review of counter-terror policy, particularly with reference to tackling radicalisation?
Well, I know Home Office ministers will be very happy to meet the Honourable Lady and indeed her constituents. I think, of course, we want to work together to try and prevent other tragic cases like this one. And, of course, let's not forget the victims of the suicide bomb as well as the suicide bomber. And that is going to be a great generational task for us. It's clearly that Islamic extremism and the radicalisation of our young people is not going to be something we solve in the space of a week or a month or even potentially in this Parliament. So we need to work across party divides. We also need to work with all the different public services to make sure we prevent these young people thinking that somehow their life or their death is better off on the other side of the world.
Alan Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's employment figures are good news for my constituency of Havant, where the number of people out of work is down by 895. During the election, the Chancellor set out his plans for the South Coast. Can my honourable friend update the House on what steps he is taking to deliver on those commitments, which deliver aspiration and growth for my region?
Well, first of all, I very much welcome my honourable friend to the House. Isn't it extraordinary that after 32 minutes of this session, not a single question from the Labour Party on jobs? And when an honourable member stands up to talk about the good news in his constituency, he gets shouted down by the opposite side. The truth is, the long-term youth claimant count in his constituency is down by 50%. We're going to go on investing in the South Coast. At the general election, the Labour Party wanted to cancel the improvements to the A27. I thought it spoke volumes of their long-term vision for our country. We're going to go on investing in that vital road on the South Coast and the other key infrastructure we need to see, road and rail and broadband across the south of England.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This will be Is the First Secretary aware of the concern amongst authors that the calculation of the public lending right is being distorted by the increasing number of public libraries being run by volunteers because of the huge cuts in local council spending? Will he ask the Culture Secretary, who I know is extremely knowledgeable in these matters, to ensure that this is rectified and that writers can reasonably expect the rewards to which they are entitled?
Well, I know we've been able to address some of the concerns about lending rights in the last couple of years, and I'm very happy to look specifically at the case, the issue he raises, and see if there's more we can do.
Done nothing. Sir Gerald Howarth.
Today's unemployment figures provide further compelling evidence of the strength of the United Kingdom's economic recovery, thanks in large measure to the long-term economic plan. But given the strength of that recovery, may I lodge an appeal to my right honourable friend that we do now commit to spending 2% of GDP on our defences, both to plug the military capability gaps we have had to sustain and in these troubled times to assure our principal ally, the United States of America, that so long as we have a Conservative government, defence of the realm will be the number one priority of this government.
Well, look, first of all, I welcome the support of my honourable friend for the economic plan that is delivering those jobs in Aldershot. Of course, the military and the defence industries are an incredibly important employer in his constituency, and he's absolutely right that we can't have strong defence without a strong economy, and he's right to link the two. We are spending 2% of our GDP on defence. We've made a big commitment to the future equipment programme for defence, and we'll set out our future plans at the spending review. If I might, Mr. Speaker, at the end of this session, since he raises a military matter, it is the 75th anniversary of the sinking of the HMT Lancastria. It was the largest loss of British lives at sea in the history of this maritime nation. Some of the survivors are still alive today, and many, of course, mourn those who died. It was kept secret at the time for reasons of wartime secrecy, and I think it's appropriate today in this House of Commons to remember all those who died, those who survived, and the families who still mourn them.
Order.